Okay, well, we are way overdue for a Ragnarok Cometh update because we do have quite a few severe weather events taking place around the planet. And so I do have quite a few articles to cover tonight. But before we actually look at all of these events that are taking place with severe weather and, other related environmental events that we are now observing as we move towards Ragnarok, let's just have a look at the influence of the solar energy on terra firma. And we can see that the X-ray flux has not been so active. However, we are seeing activity in the purple angstroms, and these angstroms down here are still registering energy, and so we would feel all energy exchange from our star, including energy at this level. And it's interesting that we are seeing this purple a lot more prevalent now, and it seems that we're also seeing some more unusual earthquakes and significant earthquakes occurring over the last week and a half to 2 weeks. And so it's also good to remember that we are approaching March 11, and we do remember what happened March 11, 2011, and that was the Japanese earthquake. And so we are moving into a time where we could see more of this movement. And so when we're seeing quite a few earthquakes around Japan over the last few days, last week, then that would be something that we should actually pay attention to, because we do know Japan is a very unstable area, and if we are going to experience instability, we may see that instability around Japan again. However, we cannot actually predict exactly where these shifts will occur. So we may see a large shift like what happened in Japan. However, we may see this happen in another area. Could be California, could be New Zealand. And so really, just as we're moving towards March, and we are moving towards this time where we're experiencing more activity, then we do need to pay attention, and especially if we do live in these areas, see that these events that we have observed over the last week to 2 weeks may be actually an indication of something much bigger that is down the line. So everyone needs to understand that this is where we are moving into, where things are starting to get more severe on all the levels. So not just only in weather events, which we are seeing, but this is also going to translate to the terra firma and the movement and the activity within Mother Earth. And this is also related to the volcanic activity, which is still continuing. We are still seeing eruptions, and there is still significant activity happening with volcanoes. And so this is all related. And so we can see that we've had, a less active X-ray flux, no significant flaring. We've got the electron flux here. We see this pattern pulse continuing. This pulse has continued for quite a while now. We did have a bit of a proton spike because we had a full halo CME about 24 hours ago. So we did see something register pretty much immediately when that CME was released from the sun. And so we will be having to now expect to feel the influence of that energy exchange. That full halo CME is going to be felt. We've also had another gamma ray burst. This one is from Virgo, and we've had one from Vulpecula. So on the 22nd, very interesting number, we have 2 gamma ray bursts, and this is where we must remember the principle of cause and effect, and that everything that happens is according to law. And this is what we understand when we are looking at Ragnarok. We're not just looking at the physical environment, where it's just all of the environmental changes. When I do my Ragnarok video, we look at how that also relates to us consciously and spiritually, or our soul. And so we have to understand, when we're seeing these energetic exchanges and these energetic events, that this is going to be relating to us on many different levels, and especially the 3 causal planes of the physical, the mental and the spiritual. So let's have a look at what's been happening around the planet while we have been waiting for a Ragnarok update as all the shit hits the fan. So first we can see that we've had another weather snap, another cold snap up in the northern hemisphere. We've got Niagara Falls freezing. Now it has frozen solid, and it did freeze last year as well. This is when I started identifying that we were moving into a colder period, that the sun had changed its cycle. We had a gamma ray burst from Orion, and I knew when I was doing my observations of the data, and because I'd been watching everything for so long, what that actually meant. And then I saw it starting to relate in all the cold weather, and that's when we started having our first polar vortexes come through. And so this has just continued on, and it will just continue on because we are moving into a cooling. And even though they say that it was the warmest winter on record, that is just averages, okay? Maybe it's the warmest winter on record in the averages, but these cold snaps are unprecedented. And unless you can identify that, if you are a zombie and you can't identify that, and you're just listening to the white coats tell you that this is all completely normal, even though we're supposed to have the warmest winter on record, then, you know, good luck. But for those of you that are listening to your instincts, and you can see, observing nature and your environment, that we are experiencing significant changes around our planet, and they continue to happen, and they continue to get more extreme, you will understand that you need to prepare for what cometh, because this is not going to stop. And so use these events. If you have not prepared and you do find that there are areas that you were lacking, then fix it and make sure that next time you get another polar vortex come through, you are ready, because they are just going to be getting more extreme, and eventually everything's going to be snap frozen when these events happen. This will happen to entire cities, and everything will just grind to a halt. And it will damage power lines. The grids will go down, and then when you have no power to generate heat, you are pretty well fucked. Especially when you're living in an environment that is a potential threatening environment to you physically, because it is so cold. At least in the southern hemisphere, with the heat that we've been getting, it's not life-threatening in the way that you must seek warmth. And when you are existing in these areas, you really need to pay attention to what is occurring and move out of normalcy bias, where the white coats want you to stay. Nothing of what is going on is normal. Nothing of what has been going on since 9/11, at least on the political level, but at least even on other levels since the BP oil disaster, and then all the space weather that seemed to start with Comet Elenin and the cycle 24, which has been the very strange solar cycle they do not understand, nothing has been normal about what has continued to happen over the last 4 years, and we can see that the political environment has mirrored how these events are also accelerating on this environmental level and climate level. We can see that the political level is mirroring this because they understand that this is also meaning we're moving towards Ragnarok. So when we do see these events, you can imagine that they are looking at these events too and understanding where they are in the cycle. So expect the fuckery to start ramping up. You know, we're starting to see them talking about war. We're starting to see them doing these polls about whether they think that American troops should go in on the ground to fight ISIS, and apparently the zombies think it's a good idea. And this is why they've created ISIS. So now anyone's just happy to just be rid of ISIS, and they will encourage the government to go to war and wipe them out. So it's all a part of their script. And unless you understand we're moving towards Ragnarok, there's nowhere in hell you're going to understand why they're psychopaths and the way they act. This is why it's all interrelated, and this is why I do my videos in this way and do bring everything together. Because if you don't look at the big picture, how the hell do you think you're going to have an understanding of everything that's happening if you're not bringing all of the factors together, which is what we should be doing now after 4 years, and starting with space weather, which is where I started with my channel, looking at all the space weather, and then that brought me into the mythology, and then that brought me into the soul and the spirit and that side of the information with Kabbalah and the Kabbalion. And so it has just been a unfolding of information as the pieces were put back together again. And so this is why you need to have a larger perspective of what is occurring on our planet if you want to understand the insanity and not move into hopelessness and depression, and then live in the denial that this planet is, you know, healthy and we're all happy and we're living here authentically and in alignment with creation and the universe, and it's all okay, and then just one day evil will stop. I mean, this is how people get themselves through the day when they do not have an understanding. They actually believe that things will just stop and become peaceful and we'll all be happy and not slaves anymore. This is part of the indoctrination for them to believe that reality as it's lived now under Roman law is normal and authentic. So, yeah. You really want to understand that the reason that the world is a fucking insane asylum is because we are moving towards the end of the cycle, and the reset is coming into the new great year, which means there's going to be the reaping. And that's the part people are offended by. They cannot confront that understanding that as a soul on an ethereal level, you were accountable, even though you can't tangibly experience that in the physical because you're manifesting matter. That is the truth of the whole creation of the human species, that we aren't just meat suits. We're also ethereal souls. That's why we have to account for everything on all the levels, because we have to account for the ethereal part of who we are, the conscious part of who we are. And this is not what Rome has educated the slaves with. They have just educated the slaves with the physical aspect. And so people just think about the physical part of who they are And this is attached to the physical solar year, whereas the ethereal is attached to the 26,000 ethereal year, the great year. And this is why events happen very slowly on universal time. And this is why people can fall into normalcy bias, because they expect to happen on their time, on yearly time, solar return time, which is human mankind physical time, and that's just not how the universe works. Unfortunately, the universe doesn't revolve around man, which man likes to think. So yeah, he is about to learn his place in the universe, and this is the part of Ragnarok that people find very confronting, and they would rather just believe that everyone is a good soul and we just all continue to destroy creation forever and ever, and evil will just one day magically disappear. We will just wake up one morning and everything will be perfect again, like it was in the golden age, like it was in the ancient times when they were all living in harmony. And again, we've been programmed to believe that that's only something that happens in the past and we'll never achieve it again. We just have to look back and wonder how they lived. And this is just the programming that everyone is suffering. And so those that want to escape the program and learn that we are in a larger existence, you know, we aren't just this insular man on planet Earth, which is all we look at. We actually have to look towards other influences that are larger than just man on Mother Earth. And this is what we don't account for, and this is why people are so confused and don't understand Ragnarok. Or they just want to go to the physical and they want to bring everything down to Birkeland currents, Birkeland currents, Birkeland currents, because they don't have the ability to understand information on an ethereal level, because it takes a different type of understanding. It takes an intuitive type of understanding. You have to move down into your car, into your intuitive part of who you are, and you have to use your heart to use your car. You can't not use them together. And so until people learn how to do this, then they will remain ignorant. And when people believe that using your heart is sharing sickly sweet memes that just say positive things, you couldn't be further from the truth. Using your heart is speaking out against evil, speaking out against corruption, and that is what love is. It's love for your Mother Earth. It's love for creation. And until you can love creation equally, you have not found an understanding for who you are, and you will continue to wander around in the dark. And unfortunately, most people will choose to want to wander around in the dark rather than go and inform themselves with the information and just have that will to go and have an understanding. They are just happy to take information from whoever tells them what to believe, and it sounds good, and so this will be their belief system that they will attach themselves to consciously. And so these are the people that get very threatened by my videos, and I tend to get a lot of negative attacks, and unfortunately this is how people respond when they cannot accept truth. And that is not my responsibility, and this is what people do need to understand. You are not responsible for waking anybody up. You are not responsible for somebody else's journey. You are only responsible for protecting creation and your creator and divinity. And if you have an understanding for truth and sacred knowledge, you do have a responsibility to also protect that flame. Other than that, every soul here is accountable for their own journey. They all had a path back to who they were again, and it was just a matter of finding that will and that conscious element within themselves that wanted to push themselves to that understanding. And so they are responsible if they don't accept information. They are responsible if they don't want to go and find information and they would just rather take information from Fox News. They are responsible for that, and they will have to come to their own fate in the end and face it. And they will. Each individual soul will do this, but that is not your concern. And so this belief that people have to wake up others is, again, just more indoctrination. You just have to make sure that you are doing right, what is in alignment with creation. However, if you have brought children into this physical manifestation, you have a responsibility to prioritize their well-being over all else. And so this is why really I like to do these videos and make sure people understand that these events are going to get more severe and prepare for them, because I hate to think of children suffering because of ignorant parents. And so that's the other motivating factor that I do Ragnarok, is because I do want people to take this information seriously and start understanding that what your instincts have been telling you are indeed correct, and you do need to start preparing for what is approaching, because these events, they will get more severe. And if you have not actually prepared and you have made decisions that weren't for your benefit, you are going to suffer, and maybe other people with you that are in your care will suffer. So that's where we have a responsibility too. Okay, so what have we here? We've got extreme cold causing strange phenomenon in the sky. Again, we are having these events that no one has actually previously witnessed before, and this is due to the severe cold, but it's also due to the crystals and the way that the crystals are forming. And because we are becoming more charged energetically due to the exchange of energy between us and our star, this is causing the crystals to form differently. And these unusual clouds and ice events are occurring and will continue to occur. And so this is just one of these unusual phenomenon that we are going to witness. We've also got ice caves on the lake at Michigan. So they're coming up from underneath the ice and forming caves, and they have actual stalactites, and they look like actual caves. He is standing in one of these caves that has formed. So again, the cold causing these events. We have more information actually confirming that these brutal winters are pointing to a time on our planet that is going to be a lot colder. And again, this is because Ragnarok approaches. And some are going to just relate this to the physical only aspect and bring this down to another cycle within the ice ages that occur on our planet. However, this is the end of the great year, and so what is approaching is not just another ice age that has occurred previously. And this is where these researchers that can only address everything on the physical will actually see this information as just another event, and that humankind will move through this event and everything will return to us being slaves in this system, and this is our reality once again. And this is because these, these people have the understanding that the way we live on this planet is authentic. They actually believe the way we live and, you know, the way we are utilizing our planet is authentic and in alignment with creation, and will, you know, be able to continue. And this is because these, you know, type of people also believe that mankind are that advanced that they can colonize other planets, and so we will just colonize another planet because we are just going to be super advanced. And this again is this indoctrination that there is just going to be this evolution of technology that moves us always forward, and there's no cycle. This is how they use Darwin to fool mankind into believing that we were all descended from monkeys and that there was a starting point and that there's only forward, and that is not true. Even though we are in a forward momentum, there are cycles within that momentum. And so even though we are constantly expanding out, there are still cycles within that expansion, and this is what Darwin does not address, and this is what these researchers do not address. They do not address the great year. There are no researchers addressing the great year and the significance of the great year. This has been removed from the knowledge. And so this is why mankind will be unable to have an understanding for himself and unable to have an understanding for these events if he does not even understand that he is also existing within a great year. So yes, we're moving towards the end of this great year, and this is why we are experiencing these events. And so it is really good to see that the confirmations are continuing to show that we are moving into a more colder time on our planet as we move towards Ragnarok. We have a sinkhole over in Naples in Italy that has just opened up. Again, this is because we have the changing environment of the ether moving back in and breaking down matter. And this also happens on an electric magnetic level, because some areas are actually different energy wise than others, and so some areas may experience these sinkholes more due to that, and more to that electric charge in their environment than others, you know, that live in other areas that may not have a geology that has that energy and is more susceptible to these sinkholes. However, they will continue to occur and get worse. And I don't think there's probably a way to know whether you are in an area that is going to experience these sinkholes. So it's just another part, another factor of all of these changes that we do have to be aware of. And so hopefully you've chosen solid ground and you aren't going to have any sinkholes opening up underneath you and sucking you down into the bowels of Mother Earth. Right, we've got the Canadian Coast Guard working to free a ship trapped on frozen Lake Erie. Again, more extreme cold. Minor earthquake swarm at Katla volcano. Now, even though it is a minor earthquake swarm, we are looking at this in a larger perspective, and when we see that we've got increased earthquakes happening everywhere, then we also need to pay attention to when it's happening around a volcano. Melbourne had an awesome storm. Again, Melbourne, Sydney, southeast Queensland, you guys are now in an area where these events are going to continue. And so you really need to prepare for these severe weather events where you get tornadoes and lightning and hail, and these microbursts are going to occur where these clouds, I call them hell clouds or hell storms, they just release their everything onto what's below. This also happened in a town called Toowoomba, which is in Queensland, and it caused massive flooding in 2011, and it actually wiped out a complete town called Grantham. The whole town got washed away by a tsunami that ran down the side of this mountain from Toowoomba, which is a town that's up on the top of the range, and they experienced a microburst, and because there was just so much water, it just basically wiped this town out that was below the range. So really you do need to pay attention to these events because they can cause massive flooding very quickly. And we have again come to the end of another Ragnarok because I'm now back at the solar data. Oh, hang on, I've got one more. Cyclone Marcia, Byfield, Queensland town that was first hit by the Category 5 storm is waiting for help. Now I did want to just use this example that this town are waiting for help, that when these events get more and more extreme, and say we might get 2 or 3 cyclones in a season, you may be waiting for help for a long time. So you do just want to make sure that you have prepared yourself should that eventuate, because a lot of these older people and these pensioners have not. They do think that the government are just going to turn up and magically fix everything for them because we've lived in such a stable environment for so long. This is where their normalcy bias has brought them. So really, you don't want to be in that situation, and they just are really lucky that Marcia was like a faster moving cyclone that didn't turn into a rain depression and just hang over these areas for a long time and cause more massive flooding. They only, got some flooding, and, they did get slammed, these smaller towns. Again, this is just because it was a small town that was in the firing line for this cyclone. Sooner or later, the Gold Coast is going to have an event like Cyclone Marcia, and that is a very populated area, and a storm surge coming through the Gold Coast, a big storm surge from a cyclone, you are going to see a lot of damage, a lot of flooding, those canals. It is going to get quite ugly. So just be aware. Not to mention that the erosion will just also cause a lot of damage if a cyclone of this strength was to hit the Gold Coast. And there is no reason that a cyclone like Marcia could not hit the Gold Coast, because they have had cyclones on the Gold Coast before in the 1950s that done terrible damage. People have very short memories. This is why they leave themselves in situations that can result in very negative experiences, and then they wonder why, and then they look for a reason or, someone to blame. And it's because they just leave themselves in these situations. And if you actually look at the noble virtues of the Vikings, one of their actual virtues within the 9 is stating that you do not leave your welfare in the hands of others. You always make sure that you can look after yourself. You do not leave your welfare in the hands of others. So that's a lesson that I think a lot of people are going to learn as we moveth towards Ragnarok. And so therein lies another Ragnarok update. I will leave it here. I will post all of the articles underneath and you can check them out for yourself. And, as always, peace out.